Let me just start by thanking Heather and Mr. Morosco. We really appreciate your participating today. Heather is with the Maryland Department of Commerce. As I stated earlier, Department of Commerce was our lead sponsor, and we very, very much appreciate your sort of recognizing the initiative that we were taking to work with CAMI to put this event together in order to advance the conversation about joining cyber and ag together and the nexus that needs to be developed between both of these sectors. And so I'll just turn it over to you, and thank you very much.
Sure, great. Mike, thanks so much. As Mike mentioned, I'm Heather Gramm. I am the Senior Director of Strategic Industries and Entrepreneurship at the Maryland Department of Commerce. And we're very pleased to be partnering with F3 Tech and CAMI on today's event. Both of them are incredible partners for us at the Maryland Department of Commerce. And of course, we know well the importance of both of these sectors in terms of the economic impact, job creation, and innovation opportunities that Maryland enjoys as a result. We are leaders in this sector, and we're excited about the opportunities that come from the convergence of these two industries for furthering innovation and technology adoption in the ag sector in particular. And so it's been an engaging morning, a lot of great speakers, and I know that our final session of the day will be just as engaging. So it is my pleasure to introduce Joseph Morosco. Mr. Morosco serves as the Assistant Director of the National Counterintelligence Directorate at the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. In this capacity, Mr. Morosco leads the development of strategies, plans, and integration initiatives to advance the intelligence community's counterintelligence mission and address the needs of the U.S. government decision makers. His office also directs and coordinates the activities of the National Counterintelligence Officers, who serve as focal points for regional and functional counterintelligence mission areas. Mr. Morosco has previously held a variety of positions in the federal intelligence community, including roles at the National Counterterrorism Center, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the National Security Council. And prior to joining federal government, he also served as a consultant to several Department of Defense clients and worked as a consultant to the U.S. Navy's Program Executive Officer for Undersea Warfare and the F-18 Foreign Military Sales Program Manager at Naval Air Systems Command. He holds a degree from James Madison University, George Mason University, and the National War College. And it is my pleasure to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Heather, for that kind introduction, and to the Maryland Department of Commerce for inviting me to be with you here this afternoon. I am truly honored and humbled to be part of your conversation here this afternoon and today about securing our nation's agricultural sector from those who seek to do it harm. I think this is could not be better timing for this discussion, and look forward to at least starting the conversation with a little bit of strategic context about the threat landscape and ways to think about mitigating some of those threats in partnership across the sector, industry, and with the federal government. You know, when I first started in the intelligence business roughly 25 years ago as a foreign military capabilities analyst, it was very difficult for me to imagine a scenario in which our homeland was a contested environment in which foreign actors were operating here against our critical infrastructure, targeting the very systems and fabric of our political and economic institutions as a way to gain competitive advantage over the United States. And ladies and gentlemen, that scenario is actually playing out here today as I fast forward 25 years in my career. The degree to which we are seeing harmful foreign activities here in the homeland has certainly intensified, and it has certainly focused on a variety of sectors and economic capabilities of the United States, not just the national security components of it. And as our director, Bill Evanina, likes to say, our national security is our economic security as well. And those two are inextricably linked. So I think as we start the conversation here today, I think it's important to note that you all, the women and men that comprise the strategic industries that make up our agricultural sector, are in fact part of the geopolitical battle space. The counterintelligence and security fight is not something that just happens between governments. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is today, and why our adversaries very much see you all and your industries as in their crosshairs for a variety of cyber operations, but also foreign influence activities, targeting of critical infrastructure, targeting of our strategic supply chains, and increasingly finding ways to gain access to and disrupt the very underpinnings of our economic security, of which agriculture is fundamental. So it is truly an honor to be with you here this afternoon. I would say that as we speak here today, foreign intelligence actors are actively engaged in employing innovative combinations of traditional espionage, things that spies do to gain access to industrial secrets, national security information, sensitive R&D information. They're employing traditional espionage, non-traditional espionage, inviting in members of academia, researchers coming in, gaining access to sensitive information, and then taking it back to their countries for exploitation. Cyber, non-traditional collection means that might use investments in companies as ways to gain access to information or a competitive advantage. They're employing these methods in combination across a variety, a large attack surface. And we'll talk a little bit about how they're doing that. But one of the things that they're trying to achieve here is erode American national security and economic advantage in key areas, and also erode the integrity, trustworthiness, and authenticity of American products and services, of which the agricultural sector is right in the center of. This is why this topic is so important and why this symposium is so important today. But first, a little context. As we gather here today, the foreign threat to the United States in terms of the intelligence services directing their activities against the United States has never been more complex, diverse, and harmful to U.S. interests. We made that judgment in a brand new strategy that the president signed out earlier this year. We made that judgment for several reasons. One, we all read in the newspapers about what Russia and China and sometimes Iran are doing to undermine the United States and gain an advantage. But it's more than just those threat actors. There are individual foreign actors that perhaps are ideologically motivated, that are armed and equipped with cyber capabilities that are now in this game in a way they weren't even just a decade ago. There are also terrorist organizations, foreign terrorist organizations that also have capabilities to gather intelligence and also exploit US systems and critical infrastructure that weren't in this game a decade ago. There are also a growing number of other countries that see the low cost investments in intelligence gathering, treat data as a strategic resource, and are now armed and equipped with cyber capabilities and are directing them against the United States, our government institutions, as well as our strategic industries. Many of those countries were not in this business a decade ago. They are now. So a lot more threat actors. I mentioned these threat actors being armed with more sophisticated capabilities. It's not just cyber. They are armed with advanced technical surveillance capabilities that they previously were not able to gain access to unless you had large investments in intelligence programs. Now, many of these capabilities are commercially available for purchase. They're also armed with advanced unmanned systems. The ability to put a drone over a particular facility or a plot of land and outfit that drone with advanced sensors or explosives to cause a disruptive effect or collect intelligence is now within the reach of many foreign actors, to include threat actors that are seeking to target our strategic industries. And then I would also say that lastly, these actors equipped with these tools are targeting a greater set of targets. This used to be just about stealing national secrets. This is not that game anymore. The secrets, industrial secrets that make up our economic advantage in many areas are now in the crosshairs of our adversaries seeking to erode that advantage. They are relentlessly and aggressively pursuing any number of means by which they are seeking to gain that access and insight to those things that make your industry move and tick. And that could be for a number of reasons. Some of it could be to take that information, exploit it, and then turn that into economic advantage for the adversary. Another reason could be to have a disruptive effect or hold US critical infrastructure at risk in a time of crisis as a bargaining chip. A number of different reasons, but what we are seeing is more actors equipped with more tools, more sophisticated tools going against a wider variety of targets. And all of this is happening below the threshold of, I would say, traditional state conflict. These are gray zone activities, as we like to say in this business, that tend to happen below the zone of conflict because they are less attributable, are more difficult to attribute, can be low cost investments and have a strategic and disruptive effect, and also help our adversaries achieve their foreign policy or geostrategic aims. Again, this is not something that is exclusively happening between governments. American industry is part of this battle space. I would also like to make the point that technology advancements are accelerating these trends. In this environment, we see a number of technologies in particular that have made this landscape much more dangerous. One of those is artificial intelligence and the advancements that have been made in AI capabilities and machine learning capabilities. Our adversaries are investing considerably in these types of technologies, not just to exploit the vast data holdings that they are acquiring, or in some cases stealing, but also to use that data in precision ways, as in some cases even weaponize that data against the United States. Industry is not immune to this type of weaponization. We've seen AI-enabled deep fake attacks against members of government, but also members of industry. Deep fakes, the ability to generate, false but very convincing audio or video files using the power of AI and communicate messages to shareholders. It could be to members of the public. It could also be to consumer groups about the authenticity or in the integrity of the service or product that is being delivered. That is a new feature of this mission landscape that is part of how technology is transforming this threat landscape. I would also say the connectivity that is driven by the 5G environments and the connectivity that the Internet of Things is bringing about. According to some estimates, by 2025, there will be as many as 1 trillion devices connected to the Internet. All connected, always communicating. When you think about that from a counterintelligence and security perspective in my business, while that brings great benefit to industry, it also brings great risk and vulnerability. And when you think about the ability to gain access to a target, the Internet of Things is one of those, I would say, probably a dream for somebody looking to gain or exploit the information that is being collected by those devices. When we think about the Internet of Things and think about the implications of that, we're thinking about persistent clandestine sensors that become embedded in everyday items. Sensor active materials that enable information to be gathered in real time, all the time, communicating to databases that may or may not be in this country. All of that being part of a security landscape that is open to great vulnerability and exploitation of vulnerability. As you know all too well, smart farming is here now, and it's a reality. The benefits are real and tangible. The ability for this technology to enable increases in the quantity and quality of agricultural products are real. The ability to optimize and minimize the amount of human effort that goes into farming is real. Robotics, chemical and pharmaceutical production, power generation, transportation, animal healthcare services, building management systems, all of these devices connected and communicating offer huge benefit and greater efficiencies, but they also expose us to much greater risk. Connectivity creates new attack vectors, removes barriers to the lateral movement of information, which is a good thing, but also has a dark side and that can be exploited. Enables broader access to information stores and critical control systems. But it would not surprise me if the agricultural sector, like many other critical infrastructure sectors, has a mix of these capabilities and sort of blending of diverse systems and platforms, a mix of operational technology and IOT technology that demands different cybersecurity approaches in order to secure that vast attack surface. When we think about the types of things that could present vulnerabilities to adversaries, when we think about the SCADA systems, the industrial control systems that generally are in place across critical infrastructure sectors that might be there for 30 or 40 years or have these long life cycles, where replacing insecure equipment is not always an option. We have to develop multi-layered, multifaceted security solutions across a range of old and new technologies. That is also something that the adversary can exploit if it has the ability to gain that insight and gather that information about the kinds of systems that you're running. Why would they want to do that? Well, disruption of our food security. It is no secret that the United States is the premier supplier of food around the world. Our agricultural sector is the engine for that. Disruptions of that would not only harm the reputation of the United States, but also as a reliable supplier, but also cause food security disruptions here in this country. You could have a disruptive effect. There's another aspect of this that looks at holding our sector at risk in the event of a crisis. If you gain access to this infrastructure, you can gain access and leverage to use that leverage in coercive ways in the event of a crisis. But I would also say that it's not just cybersecurity vulnerabilities that we have to think about here. When we think about foreign adversaries and their targeting of the sector or any aspect of our American economic security, we have to think holistically about the threat. About 80% of all economic espionage cases that have been brought forward by the Department of Justice have involved some aspect of China and some aspect of traditional collection. China in particular uses non-traditional collectors, researchers to come over here and acquire sensitive information that is unique to this sector. And one of the more recent indictments involving the agricultural sector points to China's use of the 1,000 Talents program to essentially embed Chinese researchers within agricultural industry and take information back to China that was of benefit to China, intellectual property developed by that particular company. In this case, this individual came, embedded himself in a company, acquired the information, quit his job, bought a one-way ticket back to China with a copy of all the company's proprietary information on a new sensitive algorithm that they were working on for a particular agricultural application. So we have to worry about how cyber is also enabled by the human element in the targeting of this sector. We also have to think about our supply chain security and integrity. When we think about all of these systems that come together to make up, the engine of our agricultural production, OT, IOT systems, we have to think about how various suppliers, various vendors might have connections to adversary governments, and how those governments might use those companies as attack vectors into our supply chain. This is hard because of the number of different venues and nodes that this could occur. We have to get a good understanding of what our supply chain is when we look at these types of threats and vulnerabilities. Where do we prioritize our security efforts along that supply chain? But first, it starts with understanding what it is and who comprises it and which companies there. And if there are any connections to foreign actors that may seek to use that as a way to gain access and insight and as a way of exploiting our industry. We also have to think about, I think, the effects of influence operations. This is not something that we tend to think of outside of things like the elections or, again, things that happen between governments. But industry is also in the crosshairs of foreign influence operations. Thinking through how an adversary might try to gain competitive advantage in global markets by conducting a tailored influence campaign against a particular company that it perceives as being not advantageous to its interests, or a particular part of the sector. Disinformation and misinformation campaigns that play out on social media that, again, seek to discredit the goods and services that this industry is providing. So we have to think holistically about this threat environment, I think, as an industry. I would also say that, as we go forward, there are a number of things I think we can do in partnership between government and industry together to ensure that we're securing one of our greatest assets, which is our agricultural industry. And that is, I think, working to promote threat awareness and making sure that we are sharing information. You may not realize, but you are on the front lines of seeing some of this of these threats in this, especially in the cyber world, appear on your networks and systems. You may, in fact, see that before the government sees that. That kind of information that you're seeing is beneficial to help us understand who might be behind it, what their objectives are, and the types of tools they may be using to target the sector. We also have insight into all of those things that can help enrich, I think, our collective security efforts as we look at threat and vulnerability. We need to have that conversation, and we need to have it more than once. This has to be a continued dialogue going forward, especially as our threat actors, as we see evolutions in their tactics, techniques, and procedures for targeting in infrastructure. We need to be sharing that information and find ways to arm you in your industries with that insight and context. I think we also have to have an honest conversation about vulnerability as well. And I know that is sometimes hard to do at a sector level. But I think, when we look at most of the vulnerabilities that remain, targeted by adversaries, NSA puts out a list every year, publicly available, of the top 10 cyber vulnerabilities. And I will say that most of these are should be easy to address with simple patches. And most of them are not, do not require sophisticated cyber tools to exploit. I think having conversations about best practices for identifying vulnerabilities and prioritizing the addressing and mitigation of those vulnerabilities is going to be key going forward. And that needs to be part of our public-private partnership here as well. I would also say that one of the things that we find beneficial in government, having a readiness plan, having a threat and sort of response plan at the ready in your companies is very important. What happens when you are the victim of a cyber incident or an influence operation or some type of insider threat that is potentially damaging to your company's reputation or the products and services that you're delivering? Having that plan and wargaming that plan is very important, and doing that outside of just the IT space is very important. Bring in all aspects of your company's staff to talk about the threat. Bring in your public communications folks, bring in your HR folks, bring in your security folks. That is how the threat, I think we can constrain some of this threat behavior, because it is multifaceted, it is holistic, and it operates across all these vectors. We need a similarly multifaceted, holistic approach to defend against it. And I would also say too, as we look to the future and we start to get a better handle on what our supply chains are, baking in security, asking those questions of your contracting officers. Who are we letting this contract to? Does this provide a potential access point for an adversary that might be seeking to exploit our networks on the supply chain side? But just starting those conversations and continuing those conversations is very important. And then I would also say, lastly, know who your FBI local field office representative is and have that individual on speed dial. One of the things that we often find here at NCSC is that the private sector is sitting on a lot of information that speaks to threat and vulnerability. To the extent that you believe that you've been the victim of one of these types of attacks, we need to get that information back here into the government. The appropriate channel for that is through the FBI field office rep or the Department of Homeland Security, their CISA organization, Critical Infrastructure and Security Agency. Those are the mechanisms by which we in the government become aware of how the threat is manifesting in your world, but also where we can reflect back to you additional insight based on information that we have and continue that conversation. So we would like this to be the start of a partnership and one that is robust and one that is characterized by growing awareness of these threats, but also most importantly, what can we do together to address those threats? So with that, I'll stop there and take any questions.
Great, thank you so much. That is enlightening and perhaps a little daunting all at the same time to think about the level of potential threat and exposure out there. And we have one of our attendees noting that farmers as we talk about adoption of technologies in the ag and farming community, there's a lot of culture difference between the way that you operate in the technology space and the cyberspace and the way that you operate in kind of the ag and business world. So it's just difficult to mesh those cultures sometimes and get everybody kind of talking the same language. So.
I would just add to that, we in the government have similar cultural divides and the way that we talk about these threats. And I would say, I think as a country, we have to, this is part of our national dialogue. We are seeing a sort of a fusing of the physical and digital worlds that we've not seen before. And I think we are still grappling with how to make sense of that. And I think part of what we need is sort of a new lexicon for talking about these threats and a new way of categorizing and prioritizing these threats. 1 trillion devices connected by 2025. Where do we put our priority attention? That also has to be part of our dialogue. And I think appreciate the comment about culture, because I think that is in fact what drives a lot of, I think, our understanding, but also our approaches to this. And we need to find ways to find common ground across our cultural and sort of bureaucratic, and then also government, public and private seams to be able to drive this conversation. The adversary is certainly doing it. When I think of China, they use whole of government approaches. They are working across all instruments of national power to pursue objectives. And we see that playing out here in the homeland. We too need to find ways to bridge these seams and to include our cultural seams as well to address this.
Yeah, great, thank you. One of a question from the audience. What are your thoughts or advice on protecting open source data, specifically in agriculture?
So I think I think this is another area. It's a great question because I think it's another area where we can come into some tension between some of our competing objectives. Open source data on agriculture and quite frankly on any, I would say, critical infrastructure area, right, where there are great benefits to putting that data out and into the public domain to foster awareness, develop new, initiatives, bring in new parts of the community into an understanding about the sector that they wouldn't otherwise have. Build awareness for first responders, all of these kinds of things. When I think about critical infrastructure, there's a benefit to being open about that and to putting that information out in the public domain. Part of the problem, though, is that then that also can be an avenue for exploitation by an adversary seeking to gain insight and understanding about vulnerabilities of the sector. And I think one of the things that, and there is a tension between those two things, between openness and sort of vulnerability. I think, as we think about this on the government side, this is not unlike, putting information about contracts out there that the government is pursuing for national security purposes. We have to find ways to protect the most sensitive aspects about that, but also be open with the public as to how we're spending the public's money. I would imagine there's a similar need in the agricultural sector to build awareness, public awareness, and attention in these things. But look at those critical elements of information to see, I think, and this is part of the dialogue, the security and vulnerability dialogue we need to continue to sustain. What are those things that could really, I think, reveal critical vulnerabilities of the sector if they were exploited? And I think we need to do a better job of collectively looking at that information and making sure that we are not sort of unintentionally opening the United States up for adversary exploitation by putting too much information out there. So, what can we put out there that achieves our objectives of transparency and openness, but then also identify those things that we absolutely must protect? And the same thing in the company space. What are those crown jewels that drive your industry? What are those that drive your company and our competitive advantage? Find those crown jewels and set them aside and make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect those.
Yeah, great, thank you. We have another question. How at the local and state level can we work with our agriculture producers who may not be aware of these threats and help them become aware and take steps to protect against them?
Great. I think one good mechanism to do this is, again, I think DHS has a number of sector coordinating councils, and I think the sector coordinating council is a good way of bringing industry together to and to include at the governing coordinating council level, state and local officials, fusion centers to you drive a conversation about threat and vulnerability. That is one way. I think we often participate in those conversations to bring sort of a national intelligence perspective into those conversations. But I think increasingly we need to find ways to push information out to the sector in ways that can be used more readily and more immediately when we have threat information. For example, we do this on terrorism all the time, right? If we have indications of a potential terrorist threat, we get that information into a bulletin. It will go out to state and local. It will go out to affected industry so that actions can be taken. We're not quite there yet on counterintelligence and security issues. When we think about the pipes and the systems we built after 9/11 to provide that counterterrorism warning, we need to now either use some of those same mechanisms or build new ones that allows us to share this information on the counterintelligence side more readily. I will say that some of this as well, especially when you're talking about cyber threats on networks or insider threats or supply chain, this is a murky area that it's sometimes difficult for folks to understand, especially when, we know we have campaigns, see something, say something on the terrorism side. You know what to do when you see an unattended package in an airport. But do we have the same kind of reaction as the American public when we see somebody leaving the airport with a terabyte of proprietary information on a thumb drive, right? We need to have the same kind of, I would say, mindset when we look at foreign actors, state actors that are here engaged in these activities, but it's going to require us finding ways to push information out more readily on this.
Yeah, great. I see in the chat, Andrew has posted a recent video from NCSC about academic theft that might be of interest to our participants. And Mike has just posted a link to the Food and Ag Coordinating Council at DHS. So both really great resources to follow up on. If there are no other questions from the audience, Joe, did you have any closing thoughts for us as we wrap up our day?
Well, I want to express my gratitude to you, Heather, and everyone out there for taking the time. You all are important partners in this fight, and yes, we are in a fight, and you all are part of it. And we need to do this together. I think these, there is no greater imperative right now when we look at foreign powers operating against the United States, in many cases here in the United States, where we need to have a strong public-private partnership. This is a way to facilitate that, but it should be the start of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. We would welcome an opportunity to continue to engage, and also, I appreciate the post of the NCSC videos. There are many other products on our website to include some unclassified materials that are, speak to threat, vulnerability, and mitigation. That could be used to drive conversations across your sector, but consider us part of your resource profile, and we would welcome engagement going forward in the future. So thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. On behalf of Commerce and F3 Tech and CAMI, we certainly look forward to continuing that conversation. So thank you, Joe, and thanks, Mike, for having us today.
Well, thank you to both of you. Really appreciate it. Valuable contributions to the conversation. I know that CAMI and F3 will continue to partner, I'm sure, in order to advance this, have additional events where we hopefully will invite you back, Mr. Marasco, in order to contribute to this ongoing dialogue. Heather, thank you. Maryland Department of Commerce, thank you. I know you're important to both industry sectors, and we look forward to your continued leadership on many of these things.